This video is going to take a look at some of the modify tools in AutoCAD. So we'll start out by using the Move tool. We will move this small rectangle. So on the Home tab in the Modify panel, we'll select the Move command. Notice the prompt is asking us to select objects we wish to move. We'll pick this rectangle. And if you remember from the last video, in our selection options, we could continue to select things. So we have to be able to tell AutoCAD when we're done selecting things. And to do that, we can either hit Enter or right-click on our keyboard. The prompt now asks us to specify the base point. So this is the point from which we wish to move the rectangle. So let's say we want to move this rectangle 4 inches straight up. We could pick anywhere on the screen for this scenario, and then we just simply follow the same steps we followed to draw a line, because basically we're specifying a length and an angle that we wish to move this rectangle. So we pick our first point, snap to the vertical, heading in the direction we want to move the rectangle, and then we'll type the distance. So if we wanted to move it 8 inches, we'd type 8 and enter. And we can see we moved it 8 inches. So if we make a mistake, we can select Undo on the Quick Access toolbar. The first undo reverted to the previous zoom factor. The second undo undid the move. So if we select Move again, if we want to move this rectangle to be perfectly aligned to the midpoint of the rectangle below, instead of typing a length and angle, we have 2 points that we can pick. So we select the rectangle, right-click to tell AutoCAD we're done selecting things to move, and now we can take advantage of our snaps. So our first point, which is the base point, will be the midpoint of the bottom of the rectangle. Our second point will be the midpoint of the larger rectangle. So we're still specifying a specific length and angle, but we're doing it by picking 2 known points. Now the rectangle has been moved. One more example, if we select the object first and then pick Move, now AutoCAD assumes what we selected is all that we want to have selected when we pick the Move command. So we don't have to right-click in this case. So again, we can pick an arbitrary point. If we wanted to move it 3 inches at a 45-degree angle, I could type 3 and then Tab and 45, Enter. So now from the midpoint of this larger rectangle to the midpoint of the smaller one, if we were to draw a line, it would be exactly 3 inches in a 45-degree line. So that's a quick look at the Move command and using Undo. Now we can look at the Copy command. This works very much like the Move command, except we're making a copy. So we'll select Copy. We'll select this smaller rectangle. We'll right-click, and then we pick a point. So if we wanted to copy this rectangle up, one right above it, we pick our first point, start heading in the direction we want to copy the rectangle. We snap to the vertical so that we know it's going to move straight up. And then we can get a little bit of a clue from our tooltip right now that this is about 3 inches if we were to click right now at 90 degrees. So if I wanted to type something close to that but round off, I could type 4 inches and then enter. Press escape. And then if I were to use my measure tool and pick the lower right corner of the original rectangle and the lower right corner of the new rectangle, I'll see it's exactly 4 inches. Similar to how we picked points for the Move option, I could pick points to copy. So if I select this new rectangle and select Copy, I could go from the midpoint of that rectangle to the midpoint of the larger rectangle. Notice how AutoCAD stays in the Copy command. I could continue to copy this new rectangle around. I'm going to hit Escape to cancel that. And so that's a quick look at the copy command. Again, if we want to erase something, we select it and then just simply hit the delete key on the keyboard. There is an eraser icon that will allow you to erase things by selecting them after picking this command, but I find that the delete key on the keyboard is consistent with other programs and how I typically do it. Next, we'll look at the scale option. We can continue to look at our rectangles for that example. So if we select the scale command, and then AutoCAD is prompting us to select the objects we wish to scale. So I'll pick that and then right click. Now it wants to know the base point. This is the point about which the object will be scaled. So if we wanted it to be scaled about this upper right corner, I can click there, and then as I move my cursor, similar to with the move and copy command where we could just arbitrarily pick points on the screen, I could arbitrarily scale this object. If I wanted to scale it half the original size, I would type 0.25 and enter. So this upper right point is in the same exact spot it was originally. Everything else got half the size. If I wanted to scale multiple objects, I would select the scale command, pick all the objects I wish to scale, and then right click. So this time perhaps we want the middle bottom of the rectangle to stay in the same spot. So I pick that point. Maybe we want this to be 3/4 the original size. I would type 0.75 on the keyboard and press enter. So now this is 3/4 its original size. Both rectangles scaled about the midpoint on the bottom. If we wanted to increase the size of an object, we'd select it. This time I'm going to select it first and then pick the scale command. However, you could do this in either order. So I'm going to pick scale. Maybe I'll pick a point in the middle. So right now I'm picking an arbitrary point. And then if I wanted this to be 150 times the original size, I'd type 1.5, enter. And now that's a larger rectangle. So the base point is important when you're using the scale command. Next, we're going to look at the mirror command. We'll use this object for that. So if we select the mirror command, and then we pick this object and right click to tell AutoCAD we're done selecting elements we wish to mirror, the prompt by our cursor now says specify first point of mirror line. So if I were to just pick a point arbitrarily on the screen, we'll notice the dashed orange line represents the mirror line. So the object we're mirroring is going to be mirrored about that line. So this is perfectly orthogonal mirror. This is some arbitrary angle. So if I wanted it to be orthogonal, I could go straight down. Notice the polar tracking is allowing me to snap to the vertical even while using the mirror command. So if I just pick a point, and it doesn't matter where I pick, it just has to be snapped to the vertical. The next prompt from AutoCAD is, do we want to erase the source object? So do we want that original object to remain or not? And the default is no, we do not want to erase the original. So I can just press enter in this case. I'll select undo so that we can try something a little different. So if I select the mirror command, pick the item I want to mirror, right click. This time maybe I'll pick the points on the geometry as my mirror line. So again, it doesn't matter where I pick as long as it's vertical. And maybe this time I do want the original to be deleted, so I'll type Y and enter. So now this object was mirrored perfectly about that, what originally was the right edge, and now is the left edge. So that's the mirror command. Next we'll look at the stretch command. This can be tricky at first until you get the hang of it, but when we select the stretch command, we have to pick a window, and it has to be from right to left. It has to be a crossing window or the command will not work correctly. So I'm going to pick a point in the upper right, And before I pick my second point here, I'll just point out to you that any lines or geometry that's completely within this window actually just moves. It's not stretched. Only the two horizontal lines in this example, the short one at the top in the middle, and then the long one across the bottom, only those two lines are going to stretch because they extend outside of this window. So I'll go ahead and click, and then I'm going to right click to tell AutoCAD I'm done selecting objects to stretch. And now I just pick my displacement points. So my first base point, I can pick an arbitrary spot on the screen. Let's say I want to stretch this 6 inches to the left. So I'll just snap to the horizontal with my cursor heading to the left and just type 6 and enter. Remember, not typing a foot or an inch symbol, AutoCAD assumes inches. So now I've just stretched this geometry, and you can see how the lines that were completely within the window actually just moved, and only the two lines that crossed through the window were stretched. Next we'll look at the offset command. So the offset command here on the Home tab in the Modify panel, when we select the offset command, we are prompted to specify a distance we wish to offset a line. So maybe I want to offset this shape we just stretched 2 inches. So I'll press 2 and enter. Now AutoCAD is prompting me to select the object to offset. I'll select this item, and then notice I don't have to right click because you can only offset one thing at a time. AutoCAD at this point is giving me a preview. If I click outside this geometry, it will offset the line outward. If I click inside the geometry, it'll offset it inward. Just so happens that there's enough room here for 2 inches to offset without it offsetting and overlapping itself. So if we click towards the outside, we see that we have a new line offset out 2 inches. I'll press escape, select offset again, and because this was a polyline, the entire shape offset. The next time I select the offset command, the offset distance that I used previously is the default this time. So we can see 2 inches is highlighted. If I press enter, it will just use that 2 inches again. Otherwise, if I want something different, like 3 inches, I press 3 and enter. So in this case here, the arc is not part of the polyline, so I'm only going to offset that and not the rectangle below it. I cannot offset inward because 3 inches is larger than the radius, so in this case I can only offset outside. Hit escape. So I'll select that arc and press the delete key to make it go away. Next we'll take a quick look at the extend and trim tools in AutoCAD. So we have the ability to trim lines. If we pick the trim command on the Modify panel, our first prompt is to select objects. This is the object we wish to trim to, so we're going to pick this line and right click. Now AutoCAD is prompting us to select objects to trim. So maybe we want to trim that line, so it trimmed it back. So notice we're selecting the part of the line we want to go away. So with this still being the trim plane here, we can pick the other side and make that side of the line go away. So when you use the trim command, the first thing you select is what you want to trim to. That could be more than one line, and then we hit right click to tell it we're done selecting the trim plane, and then we start selecting parts of lines that we wish to go away. Underneath the trim command in this flyout is a similar tool called the extend command. When we pick that, we pick the plane we wish to extend to, right click, and then start picking the lines. Once we hover over a line, AutoCAD will show us that line extended. And if you accidentally pick off the edge of the line and don't actually click on it, you get a window, and this window allows you to extend as well. So let me undo all of this for a minute and show you a couple other variations on that. Notice extend is the default option here. If we were to close AutoCAD and open it again, trim would be the default again. But whatever the last tool you used in a drop-down split button, that becomes the default. So if I select extend, pick this plane, right click, and then I can use a crossing window to extend all of those lines at once. We can do the same thing for trim. I'm going to hit escape to finish that command. I'm going to undo one more time, and now I'll select extend again. Pick that plane, right click. I can extend lines, and then another trick here is if we use the shift key, we can switch between extend and trim while we're in the same command. So now that we're done extending and trimming, I'll hit escape. The very last tool that we're going to look at is the array command. So I'm going to select all that and delete it. So we'll pretend like this is a chair in a classroom and we wish to array it. So I'm going to select the rectangular array option from the modify panel on the home tab. I'm going to select this arc and this rectangle. I'm done selecting items I wish to array, so I'm going to right click. And by default, based on the size of the geometry you selected, AutoCAD automatically gives us 4 columns and 3 rows and then spaces them out a certain distance. We can use these grips that show up on the screen to add more rows and columns. We can use this other grip to change the spacing graphically, so we don't have to be precise if we don't want to be. But if we want to specify specific values, we just come up to the contextual tab. So now that we're in the array command, we're in this contextual array creation tab. This only shows up when the array command is active. So instead of 11¼ inches, we want this to be exactly 1 foot for the column spacing. And you notice that updates immediately when I click into another cell. Maybe the spacing in the other direction is 1 foot 2. So 1 foot symbol 2 enter. So pressing enter also causes it to update. Once we're done, we simply hit close array. And anytime in the future, when we click on one of those elements that was part of the original array, we get the contextual array tab that comes back up where we can change these values. And then we have to hit close array to finish that. So that's a quick look at several of the modify tools in AutoCAD.